Tonight, the election gambling scandal continues. First, Rishi Sunak suspends 2 candidates, and tonight, Labour's been caught up in it as well. It's understood that Kevin Craig, who had been Labour's candidate for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, placed a bet that he himself would lose. Rishi Sunak, meanwhile, is facing questions on why it took him nearly 2 weeks to suspend 2 candidates in his party being investigated by the Gambling Commission. Also tonight, we've been taking a deeper look at who's winning the campaign wars online and who's been the most successful at grabbing your attention so far. Plus, our leader interview series continues. This time it's a turn of Plaid Cymru and their leader, Rhun ap Iorwerth. And we're still waiting for a whole host of newspapers to announce which party they're backing at the election. But how much does it matter? Tim Loughton and Andrew Fisher are backing us tonight. They'll be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday. I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Campaigns can change things. When Rishi Sunak decided to call an early election when he was 20 points behind in the polls, I'm sure that's the argument that he and those around him were making at the time. Campaigns can change things. And usually, as an election approaches, the polls do narrow, and they traditionally narrow in favour of the governing party. In fairness, there has been a slight uptick of 1 or 2 points for the Conservatives recently and a slight downtick for Reform as well. But it's not the overall narrative of this campaign, because there has been change in this campaign. It's just not been in the direction the Conservatives were hoping for. There are 2 big clues that we have about the way a campaign is going. The first, obviously, is the polls. And the second is the seats that each party is visiting. This tells you so much because it reflects the internal numbers the parties are looking at. Rishi Sunak was in true blue Chelsea yesterday, a Conservative seat with a majority of over 10,000. He's visited 8 seats with Conservative majorities of over 20,000. Now, The Guardian reports the party's been rerouting resources to defend 3 seats held by cabinet ministers with majorities of more than 20,000 as they retreat to safer ground. And Labour, well, analysis from the Financial Times says that Labour is directing its activists away from Lib Dem target seats, implying that both parties are focusing on unseating Conservatives rather than taking votes off each other. Now, this is the business end of the campaign. This is a time when the organisation really matters, the campaigning and then also, of course, getting the vote out. And it is absolutely true that campaigns can change things, but of course it's not always in the way that the party who called the election wants. The big story today, of course, is the gambling scandal, the betting scandal. It had looked at the start of the day that it might be dying down, but of course, the day's drawing to a close with Rishi Sunak having suspended 2 candidates after nearly a fortnight of questions, and Labour finding themselves dragged into it as well, suspending a candidate and returning 100k that they donated to the party. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
Sorry, you want me to say?
For days, asked what action they can take on the betting scandal, top Tories have been very clear.
Given the nature of the inquiry, it wouldn't be right for me to comment.
The appropriate thing to do is for the appropriate investigating authority to conduct that investigation.
People should enjoy the benefit of whatever doubt there is.
Well, today, that changed. Craig Williams and Laura Saunders, both under investigation for allegedly betting on the date of the election, had their support from the party withdrawn.
This guy loves them, and every time I sit...
Craig Williams was Rishi Sunak's closest aide in Parliament, always at his side.
He asks me questions every minute of every day because he's next to me for most minutes of every day.
Suspended candidates will still appear on the ballot, but won't have any party backing. In a statement, Williams vowed to fight on.
I committed an error of judgment, not an offence, and I want to reiterate my apology directly to you.
Labour initially gleeful.
It's taken Rishi Sunak the best part of 2 weeks to act on this. That is just weak leadership.
But later in the day, they suspended one of their own candidates. Kevin Craig put under investigation by the Gambling Commission, not for betting on the election date, but for betting on himself to lose his race.
We have a chance to do things differently.
It's not just politicians. The Gambling Commission has told the Metropolitan Police it's investigating 5 officers for allegedly betting on the election date. Last week, one of the PM's close protection officers was arrested over alleged bets. But with just 9 days until the election, this is still a political crisis. From the cabinet downwards, the question across the Conservative Party is, how did this decision take so long? Is it because the Prime Minister was too attached to his close aide, Craig Williams, to cut him loose? Is it because he just didn't see the scale of the danger? Either way, candidates don't like the answer, but the damage with voters has already been done. How much have people noticed this story?
Well, this is the #1 issue, the #1 story with the British public, according to our AI-powered cut-through tracker. It's bigger than the Euros, it's bigger than any other story around the general election campaign itself, and it's been that way for the past 4 days.
The grandeur of a state visit from the Japanese emperor. For Rishi Sunak and his ministers, a world away from stories of sleaze and grubby bets. They might not have many more moments like this. Sam Coates, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, these are the 7 candidates standing for election in central Suffolk and North Ipswich on the 4th of July. And on your screen now, this is the full list of candidates running in the Bristol North West constituency. That's all of them there. And here we go, this is the final one, the full candidate list for Montgomeryshire and Glendower constituency. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is here now. Let's divide it into two, shall we? Let's talk about the Conservatives first. It's a story that Rishi Sunak has just not been able to shake. Do you think he's finally hoping to draw a line under it?
He'd be hoping to, certainly. But, I mean, he's taken 2 weeks or so. And I've been to debate after debate where he's been asked about this, including the Sun event last night. Oh, I'm incredibly angry, he says, but he doesn't do anything about it until today. He did yesterday announce the Tories were going to have their own internal inquiry, and I suppose at that point we perhaps should have thought, oh, well, perhaps they are going to do something. But for days and days and days, both he and senior ministers like James Cleverly have been saying, oh, can't talk about it, Gambling Commission inquiry. Well, that hasn't worked at all. That's been a disaster. There was actually a poll out today showed how bad the public views this, actually. I think it's something like 2/3 of voters, including more than half of it was 63% overall think the government's handled this very badly, and 54% of Conservatives think the government's handled it all very badly. It's not going away because Craig Williams, he's not going to go quietly. His defiant statement today, where he said that I'm on the ballot paper, I remain on the ballot paper. He apologised. He said he's cooperating and so on, intends to clear his name. But the point about both these suspensions, if you can call them suspensions, is they're on the ballot paper. Some people have voted already, haven't they, in postal votes. So the point about that seat, the Montgomeryshire seat, you remember it was Lembit Opix a few years back. It was a Lib Dem stronghold for years, the Liberals before that. It's the Tories at the moment safest seat in Wales, 12,000 majority, and they would have had hopes of holding it. But, well, we'll see.
Again, it's just another campaign trail day where Rishi Sunak is not talking about his core messaging, he's talking about this instead. Labour, just to kind of throw a complete curveball in the mix, you've got this guy who's now suspended, was a Labour candidate, who he was suspended for, let me get this straight, for betting against himself. Just explain, John.
Well, we heard this. We heard that this candidate called Kevin Craig, no relation, by the way.
I love the clarification
no relation.
there.
I know him. I've met him. He's quite a mover and shaker in Labour Party circles. He's a big, successful lobbyist. He was the candidate in a seat. It's Dan Poulter's old seat. It's called. Let me get this right. It is North Ipswich and Central Suffolk and North Ipswich. Nicky's nodding because I know she chaired the selection for the Conservatives. Now,
this is just showboating now, isn't it, on the constituency knowledge?
But what is interesting about Kevin Craig is that he's a very successful political lobbyist, and he gave £100,000 to the Labour Party last year. He also gave £39,000 to help fund Wes Streeting's office. Now, there was some controversy about his selection because, of course, he was such a big donor. He was a short list of one. I should say there's also some controversy about the Tory candidate, Patrick Spencer, because his father, a former Tory treasurer, Lord Spencer, gave £250,000 to the Tories before he got selected. Anyway, contrition from Mr Craig this evening. He has put out this statement explaining what happened. He says, "Throughout my life, I have enjoyed the odd bet for fun." Now, remember, Craig Williams talked about a flutter. Mr Craig's talking about the odd bet for fun. Whether on politics or horses. A few weeks ago, when I thought I would never win this seat, I put a bet on the Tories to win here, with the intention, he says, of giving any winnings to local charities. While I did not place this bet with any prior knowledge of the outcome, this was a huge mistake for which I apologise unreservedly. It's the seat that used to be Dan Poulter, the Conservative doctor, before he defected to Labour, April that was, and it's a 23,000 Conservative majority. Senior Labour people say to me, not one of our target seats. So you can say that again, although they may win some with big majorities. So Labour dragged into this, not on, obviously, the date of the election. It's not good, is it, betting this sort of bet? If a footballer or a cricketer did this, the authorities would probably throw the book at them. All this betting, it's exposed to quite a sleazy side of politics, hasn't it?
Wonder how many MPs are thinking, oh my goodness, I hope they don't look at my bets tonight. John, thank you very much indeed. John Craig, nice to see you, not in a spin room for once as well. I feel like I'm always...
Tomorrow night.
There we go. It's always good to... John Craig, the master of the spin room. Thank you so much, John. Well, joining us now to discuss this a bit more is Baroness Nicky Morgan, who served in the Conservative government as both Culture and Education Secretary, and she's representing her party today. Good to have you with us. How... Just saw John Craig there, love it. It's kind of moving parts, I love it, on the set of the Politics Hub. But back to kind of serious issues here, Nicky. How damaging is this betting scandal for the Conservatives?
Look, it's clearly been a very difficult couple of weeks, and I'm on record having said I wish the Prime Minister had taken a decision sooner. I think the right decision has been taken today, and I understand that Conservative HQ checked with the Gambling Commission before announcing to make sure that actually their action wasn't going to prejudice any investigations by the Gambling Commission. I think that is important. But I think as your clip there showed, unfortunately, these kinds of stories, because they're relatively simple to understand, you know, people betting on an election result. We've seen, as I say, now this rather odd story about the Labour candidate in Suffolk betting on his own political demise, which seems very, very odd. You know, people, of course, will internalise this and think, well, actually, hang on a second, is this what I want to vote for? And I think you're as you captured there, Sophie, this is an election campaign. There are serious issues facing the country, facing the world. And, of course, all this time spent talking about these issues is frustrating for those, including the Prime Minister, who want to talk about bigger issues.
You know, Rishi Sunak made a big pitch, didn't he, when he came into Number 10 on the steps of Downing Street, saying he wants to have a government of integrity. Is this why it's so damaging? Because people will look at this and they'll think, these guys, it's just one rule for them, one rule for everyone else.
Look, I think that's probably right, and I think people do make, draw conclusions and just think, well, you know, that's a very odd thing to do. I mean, I think as John was saying, you know, if you have some prior knowledge of something, most people wouldn't rush off to the bookies to put a bet on them. And to be fair, I think most Conservative candidates or ministers would never do something like this. And my understanding is, and you know, Tim will perhaps know more, but you know, people are incandescent. Those who are knocking on doors for hours a day, delivering leaflets, stuffing envelopes, doing all of that, are incandescent that a few in the party have really made life so difficult for the Prime Minister and others over the past fortnight.
The campaign, let's be completely frank, is looking pretty bad for the Conservatives, isn't it? Are we now in the territory where the Conservatives have given up on winning, really, and it's all about trying to stop a supermajority?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there is a point to be made, which is I don't think the British public would want a government to have a huge majority. I don't think it's good for democracy. I don't think it's good for holding a government to account. In my book, you never give up until 10 p.m. on polling night because...
An eternal optimist in that case, yeah?
You have to, look, in politics, you have to be an eternal optimist, and I know a number of elections. And, of course, this comes down to constituencies. You know, it's not... Although we're seeing the polls done on a big national basis and the swings here and there and everything else, it comes down to individual constituency campaigns. And I have seen campaigns won by literally a handful of votes from people who have been got out of their houses late in the day. But, of course, after 14 years, I think it is always going going to be a challenge, no matter who was in power and what the campaign was about, to persuade people to give you, another 5 years in power.
It's interesting you say there that after 14 years, it was always going to be a battle. And I'm particularly thinking, I guess, about the more recent chaos, I think is probably a fair word for, the Conservative Party, changes of leader. We had Boris Johnson, the Partygate scandal. We had Liz Truss and the mini-budget. Do you feel a bit sorry for Rishi Sunak? Is he kind of carrying the can for the mistakes of his predecessors?
Look, I think Rishi Sunak is in a difficult position, and I think all those people in the party... I sat next to Rishi Sunak when I was in Cabinet. He is a fair-minded, thoroughly decent person, and I think he will be having worked his socks off, and I think that he will be deeply frustrated, as will those around him, by the conduct of others, which actually have made, this campaign last couple of weeks so very difficult. But actually, knowing Rishi Sunak, I don't think he'll want anybody's sympathy. What he wants is the opportunity to get out, you should say, potentially drawing a line under what's happened in the last couple of weeks and just saying, actually, this is who I am. These are the points I want to make on immigration, where the Rwanda policy is about deterrence, on tax, where actually he wants to cut tax, on making sure that we build on our education reforms, for example. All of those
talking about those, of the education reform.
Well, I wish I would love us to talk. Well, I would love us to talk more about education.
It feels a bit like he did his conference speech about it, then forgot about it.
Well, I think the difficulty is that there are a few issues...
You agree with that, don't you? Let's be honest.
Well, I think there's always a few issues that people that really resonate with voters, and education is one of those ones that actually it's a bit more of a longer conversation. But I'd love us to talk more about education and about skills and everything else, because I think those are critical issues that people do want to hear about. But go back to the point. The trouble is, the more you're talking about things like betting, the less you're talking about the issues that people really want to hear about.
You were first elected in 2010.
Yep.
The last time there was a kind of major change of the party in power. What's your advice to Keir Starmer if he does end up, in number 10? And I know you're still fighting to win, you're an optimist, you say, but what would be your advice to Keir Starmer, coming in 2010? What does he need to do?
Well, the first piece of advice is don't listen to an outgoing Tory former minister, but assuming that he did want to take any advice from me, I think the thing that government really needs, and Downing Street, departments, is very clear leadership and a very clear sense of what the first, whether it's 100 days or 3 months or whatever it might be, you actually want to achieve. I think the government machinery, the officials are dedicated. They want to do the right thing. They'll have been scouring manifestos to give advice to incoming ministers about how they deliver on their programmes. And so actually, that the person at the top setting that tone is very important.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you this evening. Well, of course, the latest twists and turns in the betting story, sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review that, as every evening, will be from 10:30 with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Tonight, we'll be joined by the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the former Conservative Special Advisor Sam Shah. That's coming up at 10:30. Right, let's get the thoughts of our duo for this evening. I can introduce you to the former Conservative MP, Tim Loughton, and the former Labour Policy Director, Andrew Fisher. Great to have you both on the show. What is going on with this what's going on with this gambling story? Tim, are all MPs at it?
Now, this is the most bizarre story. It's not a good look, I have to say. I mean, there are two things about it. Betting on political events is not an offence. Betting on political events with inside information is.
Right.
And that's a whole issue. But secondly, it just looks really, really stupid to do something like that so close to home. It can be completely misinterpreted anyway. So anybody who has bet in this way should have the book thrown at them, frankly, just for being pretty dumb in what's happened, because it's not a good look. The Prime Minister is absolutely seething about it. That's plain to see for everybody. This is not of his making. He's desperately trying to get on with policy and their campaign. And then from left field, another googly is thrown like this. We don't need it. All my colleagues as candidates on the doorstep don't need this sort of thing.
If he was that angry, though, why didn't he suspend them immediately?
Well, I think it's a fair question. But look, when you are a candidate, if you are suspended, you are still on the ballot paper because nominations have closed. Effectively, you've got the black spot on you. And if it then turns out a few weeks after the campaign and you've lost, and in fact you weren't guilty and you're completely exonerated, then there's no recount, there's no going back on that. If it's in peacetime, as it were, and you've done something questionable and you have the whip suspended from you, then the whip can be restored ahead of the election. But it's terminal, effectively. So it was absolutely right that rather than just a knee-jerk reaction, we're going to suspend you, in which case, probably you may as well give up. There was an investigation into it, that there are questions still to be asked. Craig Williams is saying that it was a massive area of judgment, but he's, what I understand, suggesting that he was not in receipt of privileged information. He wants to clear his name. So it was right to look at it properly, which is now what's happened, and they've been suspended.
Let's talk about the complete curveball that's been thrown into the story of this former Labour candidate.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite bizarre that he's put a bet against himself in a seat that most of the MRP polls that I've looked at show that he was due to win 10 points clear, actually, on some of them. So, and it was Dan Porter's seat who then defected to Labour as well, so that's kind of undermined the Tory campaign locally, as you've got the outgoing Conservative MP effectively saying, vote Labour. So it is odd. I mean, the only thing I can compare it to, I've got a friend who supports the football team and bet against them in the FA Cup final, thinking, well, if they win it, I'm happy, and if not, then I get the winnings for betting on the other team, which is a strange way to behave, but, maybe it's that. Yeah. But it's a very odd thing to do. I mean, I think the bigger scandal there, actually, is this is a guy who is very much in the Starmer mould, his Change Labour Party, as he calls it, head of a lobbying firm, big donor to Labour, business background, gave £100,000 to the party, which has now been returned, and selected on a short list of one, which doesn't look very good for internal Labour democracy either, or lack of, in that case. So, it's not good, but it is slightly different from the Tory cases where, these people, both officials of the party and some candidates, somehow miraculously put a bet on and got it right without any insider knowledge, they claim. I mean, that does seem improbable. I wouldn't go any stronger than that, but it does seem unlikely to me that that's the case. It's a hell of a lucky bet if it is.
But what we don't know is it actually an offence to place a bet against you winning? There's no insider knowledge there. Unless he's got every single one of the 75,000 electors in his constituency to sign a pledge that they're going to vote the other way. It's not insider information. Right. It's incredibly stupid, and it's not exactly a vote of confidence to vote against yourself, and you're asking constituents to vote for you. So again, it's stupidity above anything.
I do recognise the sports thing. I have an absolutely hardcore Sheffield Wednesday fan who I know who always bets against them winning because it just cheers them up, right? Obviously, I think the John Craig point does still stand, though, doesn't it? That sports people wouldn't necessarily get away with it, so it's difficult. Tim, what's your assessment of the Conservative Party campaign?
I've seen better, and I'm.
I love having you on.
I'm quite relieved that I'm not standing this this time. And I first stood in 1992, which is the only time I've come close to voting something politically. In 1992, I bet on the Grand National, which was just before the election. And the winner was called Party Politics and came in at 18-1. And I cleaned up and it paid for my thank you party for all my helpers. That's the only time I bet on something political. I then stood in 1997 and won for the first time in 1997. And that was a really tough election. And those of us, there were 32, I think, on the Conservative side who sort of scraped in. There should have been a lot more in a normal year. Theresa May was one of them, Damien Green, Graham Brady as well. So we've seen a really, really tough campaign. But a lot of the things that went wrong before the campaign, whereas here, there's a heck of a lot that's going wrong during the campaign, and the government which called the election just can't get the steering wheel going in the right direction. Now, I don't blame Rishi for that. I mean, Rishi is, most of this stuff is not of his making, although I think he was wrong to call the election when he did, but he did, he got on with it. But most of this stuff is coming from left field, various colleagues doing stupid things. Bad advice, the whole D-Day thing was, how you can have advisors who would let him. Isn't it? No, because, look, when you're a Prime Minister, when you're a Cabinet Minister, basically you go where you are told. The whole grid is worked out, you're sent around the country, all these sorts of events going on. Somebody close to him should have said, are we serious about him leaving that? And for some reason, they didn't. But there we go.
We're out of time on this chat, but we'll have lots more from both of you later on in the programme. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. We'll check in on the online election battle as the party spend millions in an attempt to cut through with the voters. Who's best at grabbing your eyeballs? Find out next. Sky News is getting ready to move in for the election.
Hiya. All right, mate. Out you go.
Sorry?
Come on, let's go.
Is this a prank? Is that Beatles about or something?
Yeah, Kay's about. Ed's already measuring up the screens.
Oh, this is fantastic. We can have maps there, charts there, more data over there.
As they feel the pressure, you've got to go tight in.
Then you can both...
We're gone as well?
Gone.
Oh, God.
I'm not joking. We've not got all night.
Yeah, I reckon we can work with this.
This place will be our home on Election Night Live, and we'll be ready to bring you the full story first, here on Sky News.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. Now, freedom! There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Well, with just over a week to go, let's take a look, shall we, at where election campaigning has been taking place by the parties. Today, a little regular feature, because while Rishi Sunak and other members of his cabinet took a break from the trail for today's state visit of the Emperor and Empress of Japan, campaigning did continue for the Scottish Conservatives up in Ayrshire. There you go, there it is on the map. Scottish Labour also campaigning in West Dunbartonshire, which should hopefully, there we go, West Dunbartonshire, and Keir Starmer was in London setting out what he called his moral mission on tackling knife crime. Now, out in Oxfordshire for the Lib Dems, always kind of Lib Dem stronghold there, that was their spokesperson for Foreign Affairs, Layla Moran. The SNP's Deputy First Minister, Kate Forbes, was on the campaign trail in East Lothian, and Reform UK's leader, Nigel Farage, well, he was back in Kent. He's been there an awful lot during this election campaign, today visiting Dover to talk up the party's immigration plans. Now, with 10 days to polling day, I think 9 days today actually now, isn't it? The political parties are trying everything possible to reach the voters and sway their opinion. Millions of pounds are being spent on social media ads, but the big question is, are they cutting through? Our online campaign correspondent Tom Cheshire has been taking a look.
Labour and the Conservatives have been spending millions of pounds over the last 6 weeks targeting people with online adverts in the hope of getting their vote on the 4th of July. This is what they've been spending the main parties on Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook. This is online advertising. Labour way ahead, around £1.7 million compared to the Conservatives on nearly £1 million. It's a huge amount of money, though, especially if you compare it to the other parties and their share of spending. Other here actually refers to people like the Electoral Commission, so it's not political parties. We've got the Green, Lib Dem and Reform. Now, this is interesting. So there's more than one way to skin a cat online. It's a fraction of the spend. But this is when it doesn't come to spending money. This is organic interaction. The parties with the highest social interactions, so just putting a post out there, seeing how it does online. Reform way ahead here of Conservative Labour. Actually, Conservative neck and neck with Labour, which is surprisingly good compared to what we saw before. But Reform not necessarily paying any money for this. They're doing very well in terms of the online campaign. So that is from CrowdTangle, that data. And as well as understanding the sort of interactions there, on these little emojis there, that gives us a hint of what we're going to look at, because we can break this down by type of reaction too. So you've got your classic like over there. You've got a sad, we can understand that. Wow. Haha, angry, political parties probably don't want that. Care, we don't see much of that. And love, which we will talk about. And those sort of emojis here, we can analyse those to understand which is doing better. So the laughing emoji, we've actually ranked all the posts collected on CrowdTangle, that analysis of Facebook. And this is the post which has had the most laughs of the election. Rishi Sunak saying you don't have to go to university to succeed in life. Nearly 11,000 people reacting with a laughing emoji. And we're going to assume they're laughing at rather than laughing with, based on these sorts of comments. The most popular comments, true, marrying into a billionaire's family will do just fine. Same for this post too, talking about football, a tense finish, but they got the job done. Here you've got 1,400 people reacting with that laughing emoji. Again, the comments saying, did you watch the full game or leave early? A reference to what happened for those D-Day celebrations. Now, this isn't easy, though. It's really, really hard to cut through. This is a post from Ed Davey. You'd think this, more or less a campaign calibrated to appeal to social media. There's been lots of things like this. Still not as wet as Rishi Sunak. Pretty weak joke there. And it does only get 27 loves. Sadly, this is the face of most political posts. It is really, really hard to punch through. Labour does better. This is a very heartfelt post from the Labour leader, Keir Starmer. This is a post with the highest interactions, a lengthy message to his followers about his mum. Still, only around 2,000 people loved that post. So who is getting the most love online? Well, it is Nigel Farage. His post when he announced his candidacy is the most popular of the election. Nearly 12,000 people loved it. And this isn't an anomaly either. 16 of the top 20 most loved posts were from Nigel Farage. So Reform is getting the most interactions. Its leader is also getting the most love. It is a strong digital campaign without spending much money at all. Translating that into seats is another matter, though.
Right, let's bring Tim and Andrew back in, shall we? Andrew, you're very kind of in tune with this stuff, aren't you? It's something that Labour used a lot under Jeremy Corbyn, though, with the social media cut-through. How important is it?
It's very important. Look, I have to say I'm a little bit old, a bit middle-aged for some of this. So Facebook I recognise, Twitter I cope with. But, Snapchat and TikTok are beyond me. There's different worlds that I don't understand. Even Instagram I'm not on. So, I wouldn't call myself an expert. But one thing I did notice there when you're looking at the graphics is the organic reach of Labour's posts, which are well down compared with where they were in 2017 and 2019. Now, obviously,
what's the organic reach? What does that mean?
That means people naturally just sharing it. So it's not paid for being put into your timeline through paid advertising. It's people just sharing content they like.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, that enthusiasm doesn't always translate into votes. It's, that's what matters at the end of the day. But it is, I think, quite telling that Nigel Farage is way out in front. Now, Facebook is the sort of thing which people's parents and grandparents are on. It's not, where younger voters necessarily spend most of their time. So it has a different demographic. But then again, they are the people that turn out and vote, older voters. So he'll be very happy with that, I'm sure, Nigel Farage. But it is, I think, it speaks to something I think we've all felt in the campaign, which is there isn't a lot of enthusiasm for anyone, despite where the polls are. And the polling numbers beneath the headline, if you like, do tell us that. Keir Starmer's polling isn't great. It's far better than Rishi Sunak's, but that's quite a low bar to jump over. And I think the fact that Nigel Farage has got this kind of organic reach and pickup is because, like him or loathe him, and I'm very much in the latter camp, you'll be unsurprised to hear, he does kind of say stuff in a very clear and decisive way that clearly resonates with a section of the electorate, unfortunately.
And, you were kind of talking about how you first came into Parliament in 1997, although, of course, you're not running this time round. How has the campaign process changed, do you think?
So 97, social media didn't exist. We'd only just sort of got email. It started then. People were writing to us in postcards and hard copy. So this has completely changed. And whether you like it or not, and I've certainly had to adapt in recent years, you have to have social media presence. So I do a lot on Facebook, I do a lot on Twitter. I should do more on Instagram. I don't do anything on TikTok because it's backed by the Chinese government and it's banned in Parliament. I'm sanctioned by China. What's interesting about reform is how highly they've scored on TikTok, some of the earlier videos with Nigel Farage, which is not their obvious target user.
It's interesting because there is some research showing that actually younger males in particular are quite tempted by reform. I think it's quite interesting, actually, and perhaps a bit of a gender split there as well.
Yeah, there's some strange things happening. Certainly there have been some younger people engaging in reform, going up and saying, you're one for Nigel, whatever. If you go across the channel, where we've got National Front, whatever they call themselves now, some of the biggest supporters of them are young people. It's a completely different dynamic to what you would expect over here. There are strange things happening.
Absolutely right. Thank you both very much indeed. More from you later in the programme. Coming up next on the Politics Hub, we will have the latest in our series of leaders' interviews with Plaid Cymru's Rhun ap Iorwerth. And after one Scottish newspaper breaks cover to back Labour, we'll be discussing if there's still power in the printed word to turn the tide in an election. Hello, welcome back. Now, our Leaders interview series is well and truly underway. If you've missed our conversations with the Lib Dems' Ed Davey and the Green Party's Adrian Ramsey, you can catch them online. Tonight, though, we're focusing on Wales in our third interview with the leader of Plaid Cymru, that's Rhun ap Iorwerth.
Rhun ap Iorwerth may not be the most familiar face outside of Wales, but he's certainly made his mark. A former TV journalist, his feet newly under the table as Plaid Cymru's leader, binning his party's Senate deal with Labour over a donations row engulfing Vaughan Gething. He's now riding a manifesto vowing to put Wales first. More devolution in tax, justice and energy, an independent Wales still the long-term goal. But in a nation long dominated by Labour, Plaid has always struggled to cut through. Is now the time for Plaid to make some waves? On a busy day of campaigning, Rhun spoke to me from Cardiff Bay.
Thank you so much for being on the programme. Great to have you here as part of our Leaders Interviews series. So we're starting all of them in this way. Why should people vote for Plaid Cymru?
I think the reason to vote for Plaid Cymru is clearer than usual, even in this election. We've had a reduction in Wales's voice through a cut in the number of MPs from 40 to 32, so we really need to make sure that the MPs we have really do speak up for Wales, which are guaranteed of in Plaid Cymru. But also, we kind of know where this is going to end, don't we, in terms of Downing Street? Sir Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister 2 weeks from now. So we need to be holding him and his government to account for the people of Wales. We can have Labour members being elected there telling him what a great job he's doing, or you can have Plaid Cymru MPs there constructively holding him to account and making sure that he can never ignore Wales.
At the same time, though, you say there's more reason than ever to vote Plaid Cymru, but a lot of your manifesto is quite familiar. You want a publicly owned national energy company, so does Labour. You want a national care service, so does Labour. You want VAT on private school fees, so does Labour. You want to renationalise railways. You want to ban conversion therapy. I mean, you get where I'm going with this. Why should anyone vote for you and rather than Welsh Labour?
And I'll talk about all the other things where we absolutely differ from Welsh Labour. We want to tackle child poverty by getting rid of the two-child benefit cap. We want to have a reassessment of our relationship with Europe so that we can really look after Welsh trade. We want to make sure that there's investment in Wales through the £4 billion owed to us from the HS2 rail project in England, which Labour is flatly ignoring. We want to make sure that we get powers over crime and justice, which commission after commission has said that we need. Labour in Wales say we need, but UK Labour ignores us. And that is at the heart of this. Plaid Cymru won't allow Wales to be sidelined from the political debate at Westminster, which is why you need to have Plaid Cymru MPs there.
I'm interested about your kind of pitch to say that we will hold Labour to account. And it does feel that as the election's gone on, and it feels as if we're moving towards a majority for Keir Starmer. Do you think the interesting story of the Parliament could be smaller parties like yourselves, like potentially the Lib Dems or the Greens, being the real opposition, I guess, kind of coalescing together and being the ones who do hold Labour to account?
I think there's something really interesting going on in this election. As you say, we know what the overall result will be. But I'm sensing very much on doorsteps throughout Wales that there's very little excitement about what the Labour Party is offering. Yes, everybody wants to get rid of the Conservatives now, but there's no real sense of what the Labour vision, alternative vision, is. Now, we saw, didn't we, in the recent local elections in England, the police and crime elections in England and Wales, where there was an alternative, a party that was an alternative that could beat both Labour and the Conservatives, people were really going for that option because I think they agree with me that we need that plurality of voices standing up to a government which, could have a, decent-sized majority here, which doesn't really help us. Let's bring those different ideas and hold them firmly but constructively to account.
I want to talk about a couple of things in your manifesto now. One of the big things that you talk about is climate change, and you open your section on climate change with this. Forecasters have made clear that the world is on course to become an uninhabitable planet. Is that right, the whole planet uninhabitable? Because obviously there's been reports about parts of the world becoming uninhabitable, but, that looks pretty scary.
Oh, it is scary, Sophie. I mean, I talk to my own kids and, we have to, talk about the threats to our environment in the most stark terms. We only have to look around the world now and see what's happening in terms of extreme weather. That is going to lead to pressures on, movement of population. We are at a crisis point. Plaid Cymru put forward a motion 3-4 years ago.
I absolutely recognise, the very stark warnings and the concern that people have around climate change. But what are the forecasts that you're basing it on that you say that the world's on course to become uninhabitable?
Well, these are the agreed forecasts of climate scientists world over, that we are not meeting our obligations to limit climate change. Climate change has already happened. It is continuing to happen, but we are still not meeting those obligations that we need to in order to stop it becoming even more catastrophic. I believe those scientists, and I believe we have to take the real steps that can hopefully make a difference. And people tell me quite often, you know, we're only small, we're only 3 million people in Wales. Let's just carry on doing what we've always done because we can't make a difference. Well, it doesn't work like that. As an internationalist, the international community, whether you're a small country or a large country, you know, have to be acting on their own obligations and playing our part.
You talk a lot about Wales. You, of course, want to see an independent Wales and also more devolution to Wales as well. Public spending per head is higher in Wales and in Scotland and also higher than in every region of England. Could you guarantee that an independent Wales would be able to match that spending?
London has higher spending per head, as you know, Sophie, than Wales does. The amount spent varies from nation to nation, region to region. All we're saying in this election, as we always have done.
My numbers are that in 2023, Wales got 12,700 of public spending per head, and London 12,500. Is that not true?
But London is more often than not at a higher level of spending than Wales. You look historically, Scotland's at a higher level, Northern Ireland is at a higher level. But what we're saying quite simply is this. We need to make sure that when the Treasury spends money and shares out money across the UK, it has to be done in a fair way. Now, we don't believe that the current way that spending is allocated to Wales and to Scotland is done fairly. It's done according to what's called the Barnett formula. The Lord Barnett, who devised that formula, decided many, many years ago that it was already out of date. It's well out of date now. We need a needs-based formula. Now, I'll look at that from a Welsh perspective. Others in England might want to make the case for English regions too, but I think it's a bare minimum, isn't it, that we should be able to trust that the Treasury looks at the needs of populations and spends money accordingly.
You are relatively new to the leadership. You're a face that many of our viewers might not have seen before. You were elected after a report into Plaid Cymru had found a culture of harassment, bullying and misogyny. Have you cleaned up your act?
It was a difficult time for us. We commissioned this report ourselves, and you know, others have suggested that other political parties may well benefit from doing the same themselves. But this was our moment, just as so many sporting organisations and other organisations, the CBI, political parties have been through a wake-up. We went through that because of the report that we published and commissioned ourselves. The report gave us 82 recommendations, and I sit here now a year on from becoming leader and saying this was my #1 priority. And yes, we have been through that list and ticked off the 82. A couple of technicalities around some of them, but it's pretty much done. But the key thing to me is this. It is never over. We always must keep an eye on the need to make ourselves, in deed and in words, as opening and as welcoming a party as we possibly can be. People tell me that the party feels very, very different. I hope they're right. I sense that they're right, but maybe ask others.
OK, I'm going to end with a quick fire. You ready? Tom Jones or Shirley Bassey?
Go.
What's your hidden talent?
Oh, Tom Jones and playing guitar badly.
Well, any
more Tom
particular
Jones songs than Shirley Bassey. Oh, lots and lots. I compose and things, but I wouldn't put you through it.
OK, I'm going to try and find if I can dig any out on the internet later. You're a former broadcaster. Who do you enjoy watching on telly?
Sophy Ridge, obviously.
Oh, no, come on. Give me a proper answer to that one. It's not going to win you any points here.
Oh, no, I know. Yeah, it's too late. The interview's over now, I know. But no, I'll watch anything, really. I'm into my sports documentaries at the moment. It's a proper switch off from politics.
And talking about sport, who are you supporting in the Euros?
Oh, you know what? France has been my favourite team for a while, actually. But I'm still devastated after watching Wales fail to qualify in that penalty shootout against Poland. You know, devastated. We're used to qualifying for everything nowadays, so I'm still getting over it.
Are you hoping England win tonight?
I hope sport's the winner.
OK, nicely dodged. Thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the programme.
Thank you, Sophie.
The leader of Plaid Cymru speaking to me a little earlier. I do have a bit of breaking news to bring you now as well. It's about the story we've been leading on tonight because a Welsh Conservative member of the Senedd is currently being investigated for alleged bets, again, on the date of the election. In a statement about the story, Andrew R.T. Davies, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, said, Russell George has informed me that he received a letter from the Gambling Commission regarding bets on the timing of the general election. Russell George has stepped back from the Welsh Conservative Shadow Cabinet while those investigations are ongoing. So that breaking news to bring you another suspended member of the Conservatives. Still to come on the Politics Hub. How much sway do our newspapers hold in an election? After another paper comes out to back Labour, we'll take a look at who the tabloids and the broadsheets have previously thrown their weight behind.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, another bizarre twist in the election gambling scandal with a Labour candidate suspended for betting against himself. We'll get the latest from our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Plus, a man described as the architect of the Horizon IT system apologises to those who were wrongfully convicted, but defends the software. And the trial of a man accused of plotting to kill Holly Willoughby. His disturbing evidence from his WhatsApp messages and online searches. All that and much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
The Hajj pilgrimage itself, I think we were quite lucky just because we were cycling and travelling throughout the Middle East. We had a chance to accustom our bodies to the heat and the sun, the temperatures, and as we further went south, it did get really intense and a lot more humid, a lot more dry the further south you went. But we had the chance for our bodies to acclimatise, you can say, to the heat.
Once you get there, it's a lot of walking. You have to walk from a lot of different sites where you perform your pilgrimage rituals, and you're going back and forward from the mosque to you're staying in tents as well, and you're also on one of the nights you're just camping outside with no tent. I mean, it's hot enough to do so, you don't even need a tent, and you're just carrying the rituals. But I'd say over the course of the 6 days, me and Abdul actually walked. We never took any coaches. We were young and fit, so we actually walked the whole distance.
You've seen a lot of the elderly and mothers, especially, just from exhaustion. The Saudi ministry, they've actually set up a really good infrastructure for the pilgrims. It's all a pedestrian route, and they close the roads down as well because the sheer amount of people there. So there's a lot of people taking several different routes, but you see a lot of people just taking a seat, sitting down at the side of the pathway just from exhaustion. The biggest task out of the 5 days is Eid day itself. All of a sudden, you've got 24 miles to cover by walk. There's no means of transport at all just because of the sheer number of pilgrims. The roads are closed. You can't get close to either the destination you're going to because you're travelling to a number of destinations on Eid day to carry out the rituals. And you see a lot of pilgrims just taking a seat at the side of the pathway. And it's hard to muster the energy to get back up after you're suffering from heat exhaustion.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, we were just hearing earlier about which parties trying to grabbing the attention of people online during this campaign, but there's also a much more old school way of influencing how people vote, British newspapers and who they encourage their readers to back. Well, Scotland's Daily Record has come out in support of Labour after not backing anyone since 2010. One paper in particular to keep an eye on, of course, is The Sun, because since 1979, it has backed the winning party. Now, I just want to show you some of the front pages. You might remember a couple of them. I think we can have them on the screen. So this is the Daily Record. They've come out to support Labour. And here we can have a look at some of The Sun front pages as well. This was 1992 from The Sun. They proclaimed they were the ones that won it when John Major's Conservatives beat Labour. This is the Sun front page of 1997, historic, of course, when they turned with the tide to endorse Tony Blair's New Labour. And in 2009, it all changed again. Labour's lost it, said the Sun, and lose the election they did. Let's have a little chat, shall we, with Tim and Andrew. We're still waiting, aren't we, to see who the Sun's going to be back, as well as some of the other papers as well. Does it matter?
I don't think it matters as much as it used to. And I remember that 1992 election, that front page of Neil Kinnock's image in a light bulb and we're the last person to leave Britain, turn off the lights. And that got noticed. But in those days, The Sun had millions and millions of readers and social media didn't exist. These days, I think the red tops, the hard copy newspapers do not have that sort of influence over readers, and social media increasingly has. My worry is that you get influencers who have got millions of followers and are trying to influence people about, fashion, food or whatever. If some of them try to influence people about politics without really understanding what's going on in the choices they're making, that has the potential to be more influential, potentially more damaging as well. At least the newspapers, the mainstream media will put together a logical, coherent case as to why they should go one way or the other.
It's always this kind of age-old question, isn't it? Are the newspapers influencing it, or are they just following what their readers think already?
I think they're trying to look relevant. I mean, I think The Sun especially has jumped with where they know the result is going. It's not been any great influence. I mean, nobody claims The Sun won it in 97 or lost it for Labour in 2010. The writing was on the wall fairly clearly in both of those elections. So, I mean, even with 92, the polls had shifted in the run-up to that election. The Conservatives had gone slightly back ahead, and I think they just read the runes fairly well. And, they obviously, newspapers want to talk up how influential they are. I'm not sure it's true, and it's certainly less true now. I agree with you there. I mean, just on influencers, I remember during the 2017 campaign, somebody from our press team ran up to me saying, novelist is backing us. And I said, oh, which one? And they said, no, he's a grime artist.
I love it.
And I said, what's grime? No, I don't know what grime was. But, I mean, there are different people who appeal to different people. And you're right, on Instagram and TikTok, there are these people, celebrities in different fields as well, that, just perhaps go over a lot of our heads, but perhaps do have a bit of influence.
Thanks both very much. Lively programme tonight. That is it from us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee.